Hey folks, welcome to the channel. Let's do coding. Today we are gonna learn about variables and its types in JavaScript. Variables are the first building blocks when learning any programming language. Variables are values in your code that can represent different values each time the code runs. For example, if I write, let's say, first name equals to Ross, right? And then we can assign first name as new value while the code is running. If I go ahead and write this, and if we try to do console.log of first name here, and then do it back, and let me save this one and run it into the UI, right? You can see the first it said Ross and then it says Chandler. So that means the first name had the value Ross first and then it was changed to Chandler. Without variable, a piece of code would do the same thing every time. There won't be anything varying into it. That's why it's called variable. Let's see how we can declare variables in JavaScript. To declare variable in JavaScript, we use special words such as let, var, or const. The first time you create a variable, you declare it. The second time you call a variable, you only use the variable name. No special keyword required. I'll show you. So I'm saying let first name is Rachel. And the second time, when I'm going to use that variable, I don't have to put the let keyword. I can just say first name and I can assign a new value to it. And if we again do a console log, we'll find that the name changes every time. You see, first it was Rachel and the second time we changed it to Monica. A variable definition consists of three parts. So let's see that. A variable definition consists of three parts. A variable defining keyword, a name for variable, and a value. For example, let num1 be 12. We can define a variable with var keyword as well. So let's put 88. Finally, we will define a variable with const keyword if we know the value is not going to change once it has been assigned. Let and var are both used for variables that might have a new value assigned to them somewhere in the program. The difference between let and var is complex, and I'll be covering that in a separate video. In short, use let for all the variables unless your JavaScript code will be running in an old browser and they don't support let and const. Then you can use var in that case. On the other hand, const is used for variables that only get a value assigned once. For example, the value of pi. For example, the value of pi, which will not change. If you try to reassign the value, if you try to assign a new value to a const variable, JavaScript will complain. Let's see what's the error. As you can see, there is an error. It says assignment to constant variable. That it means once a value is assigned to a const, it cannot be changed. Naming the variable has certain rules and some good practices. For example, a variable name should start with a lowercase letter and they should be descriptive. So for example, If we are calculating simple interest, we will be naming the variable as simple interest and not just x. Also, variable cannot contain spaces, but they can use underscore. So if I want to declare a variable name, let I don't want to declare variable, then JavaScript is going to complain about the name because it will not permit the spaces. But to make it more readable, you can use underscore, and that does the job. There are two types of data types in JavaScript: primitive data types and reference type. JavaScript has 7 primitives, which are string, number, boolean, undefined, null, bigint, and symbol. In this video, we are going to learn about the important one, which are string, number, boolean, undefined, and null. Bigint and symbol we can cover in later videos. So let's check out about the string. A string is used to store a text value. It is a sequence of characters. There are different ways to declare a string: double quotes, single quotes, and backticks. So we can define a string by using single quotes. So if we use single quotes, how that's going to look like? Let's see. Single quote strings are assigned like this, where you put the sentence or the word between the single quotes. In case of double quotes, you're just going to do the same, but instead of using the single quotes, we'll be using double quotes. The main difference between single and double quote is that you can use single quote as a literal character in double quote strings and vice versa. Let me show you. For example, if I try to define a string which contains a single quote, and I also want to create the string using a single quote, that is not possible. To fix this, all we need to do is to define the string with double quotes so that we can use the single quotes inside. But what if I want to show a famous quote from a famous author? In that case, we can enclose the double quotes in the single quotes, and that way, if we try to see it, you will see the double quotes are printed and there is no error. But what if I want to print a complex code? So in that case, you can just use the backtick, and everything you put inside the backtick will be treated as template. Let me show you. As you can see, this string has double quotes, it has single quote, and it renders perfectly. Even cool thing with the backtick is that you can create a template in which you can use variable, so your strings are no longer static. Let me show you how to do that. So let me create two variables, which are language and message, right? And what we have done with the message is that message is going to contain a variable, and it is defined as template with backticks. So in the backticks, we can use variable to create strings. For example, if we save this one and see it, you can see this JavaScript is not hard coded, but actually it is coming from this variable. So even if I say, instead of JavaScript, if I say TypeScript and save it, there you go. It says let's learn TypeScript. So what if we want to have double quotes, single quotes, backticks all in our string? And that's when we will be using escape character to get this working. Let's see how to use the escape character when we want to use a single quote, double quote, text, everything in one string. So here is a string where I'm using the double quotes to create the string, but also ensuring that I should have double quotation around mark. Well, that is possible because we are using the escape characters here. Similarly, we can use escape character with single quotes when the string is defined with single quotes. So let's save this and see this in action. Here you can see, here we are using the double quotes, but the string itself was defined with double quotes. So escape character worked. In this case, the string was defined with single quotes and this single quote would have caused the issue. But since we are using the escape character, that's why we are not getting any issue and our string renders perfectly. Let's go back to the next data type, that is numbers. The number data type is used to represent, well, you guessed it, numbers. The developers of JavaScript decided to go for one data type for all the number, that is number. We can represent any number using number data type in JavaScript. For example, we can define integer number, we can define a decimal number, we can define an exponential number by using the e as a keyword while defining the number. Similarly, you can use the O, X, and B as a notification to notify the computer that you are defining an octal number, a hexadecimal number, and binary number. If these sounds complicated to you, don't worry, we will be covering these later on. So let's talk about undefined. JavaScript is a very special language and it has a special data type for a variable that has not been assigned a value yet. That data type is undefined. For example, if I defined a variable unassigned, but I didn't assign a value to it. So if I console log the variable, since I haven't assigned a variable, it will be an undefined variable. We can purposefully define a variable, let's say don't do this, and we can assign the value undefined to it. And then if we do a console log, we'll see it is just creating the same thing which we would have done by doing this. But I would suggest don't do this because this is not correct, and unsetting the value of a variable is the last thing you want to do. So what should we do if a variable is there but we do not have a value for that? Well, like I said, you should not assign undefined value to a variable when that variable doesn't have a value. So you use null in this case. Null is a special value for saying that a variable is empty or has an unknown value. Null is a case sensitive and you should always use null with a lower case. For example, if I define a variable called empty and I assign value null to it, so when I do a console log of empty, instead of giving undefined to me, it is gonna give null value, as you can see here. Sometimes it is difficult to figure out what kind of data a variable is holding. In that case, we can use make of type of, which is an operator that checks for the type of a variable. We can use type of operator to find out the type or the data type of a variable. Let me create a variable called test variable and let me assign a value of 1 to it. The next thing we will do is we'll create another variable that will be variable type 1, and we'll use the type of operator to check the type of test variable. We can also write the above statement in this way. Now let's print out what is stored in both the variable types. So we'll type the variable type 1 and we'll type the variable, we'll print the variable type 2 as well. And let's see. So obviously, as expected, it has printed numbers for both of them. Now, you can use brackets with the type of operator because this is not a function. It usually works without the brackets as well. Let's see how we can use the type of operator to find out the data type of all the variables which are holding the primitive data type. So here I have 5 variables which are holding string, number, boolean, undefined and null value. So let's see in the console what we are getting for them. As expected, we are getting string, number, boolean, undefined, and the null is an object type. So we are getting an object for null. So that's it for the primitive types in JavaScript. I hope you liked the video and I'll see you guys in next video with reference data type. So thank you.